Thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here and talk to everybody, and I have to do this because these are not progressives and I have to see far away and then this up. So excuse the eyeglass management here. Let me get set up. So thank you for the introduction. That's who I am, and really happy to have this conversation. I'm gonna kind of just talk to you today about the process of promoting first relationships. I'm going to define infant mental health so we're all on the same page. I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory behind it. So as you develop a parenting intervention, it's really important to have a theory that drives your model of change. Why would I focus on this behavior or this aspect of parenting and not the other based on your theory of change in your model? I'm going to talk a little bit about the empirical models that are kind of driving parenting intervention research and why we land where we land. And then I'm going to go into the key elements of promoting first relationships as an intervention and review the research. And I'm going to do that all in like 35 minutes, 40 minutes, I promise. So infant mental health is defined as the birth to 5 period of time, period of development, where the child is learning to experience, regulate, and express their emotions, to form close relationships, and that's a nod to attachment theory, and to explore and learn the environment, also a nod to attachment theory. So underlying infant and early childhood mental health is the belief that in order for children to kind of develop socially and emotionally competently, they need the sort of secure base, these relationships that allow them to understand themselves in the context of relationships and an environment so that it can go out and explore. This is happening in the first year of life. This process of attachment is happening in the first year of life. And that's kind of where I'm going to head into, is the theoretical model of promoting first relationships. So infants are born, we are all born innately with the capacity to send communication cues to our adults, right? We cry, we raise our hands, we look, we turn away. If something's too much, you'll see a baby turning their head away. These are all regulatory cues that help the caregiver respond to the baby's needs and help the baby get their social, emotional, and physical needs met. So these cues in the like lay population parenting field, we call those serves. So if I look at and smile, I'm serving you a cue that says, I'm inviting you to engage with me in a happy way. And then you respond to me, and that's the return. So think of a tennis match. Serve and return is really what we're looking at in the research. And so this research, the serve and return research, or contingency, attunement, or synchrony would be other words that you would use in Google Scholar to kind of get the background of this research, is these micro moments are happening every day throughout the day. And they're telling the child about the environment from which they've been born. They're telling the child, when I smile, I get a response. When I cry, I end up experiencing comfort from my distress. I feel safe. So it's telling the child about the environment from which they are growing up in. But my work is mainly in child maltreatment populations. And we do know that parents are not always able or equipped to respond to the child's signals. So there could be lots of reasons for this. A caregiver who has a mental health issue or substance use disorder, a caregiver who is struggling with poverty or domestic violence, or a caregiver who is maybe didn't grow up with a sensitive caregiver themselves, and they really just don't have that map in their brain about responsivity. And so their responses are not attuned to the child's needs. So that yellow arrow is really representing a kind of a misattunement. So it could be a harsh, like the baby cries, could be a harsh reaction, a rejecting reaction, absent or inconsistent. So absent would be kind of on the end of neglect. And so these sort of transformations or changes in the caregiving response end up causing adaptations in the infant. So if an infant is sending out these cues of crying, I'm distressed, and they don't get those cues, their needs met, Maybe the caregiver isn't activated, right? Maybe the caregiver is sort of checked out. So the child has to change the way they send that message, and they learn to adapt. And that's what attachment theory is. It's basically the adaptation of this circle of communication, the adaptation a child does in order to work within the caregiving environment that they've been born into. So one adaptation is to amplify that negative communication, that distress, to really, really amplify the negative affect so that the caregiver kind of attends to the child. So that would be sort of a preoccupied, anxious attachment strategy. The other would be, let's say the child is showing cues of distress, and more often than not, they are rejected for that cue. So that would be sort of a punitive, maybe harsh rejecting response. They learn like, oh, that doesn't bring me comfort. That actually makes me really uncomfortable. So I'm going to inhibit that cue. I'm going to tamp it down so that I don't draw negative energy or negative reaction from my caregiver. I adapt to that environment by inhibiting my negative affect. So if you think of an affect on this kind of continuum, we have on the avoidant strategy, attachment strategy, an inhibition of needs, sort of tamping that down. And then on the other end of the continuum, we have an activation of that negative affect and amplification so that it brings the caregiver into engaging in caregiving activities. So that's really what we're working with when we are working in PFR. We're working with this dyadic system at different ages between birth and 5. So we've worked with all ages of children to help caregivers see the child and the needs in front of them, and to help the caregivers see their needs as a parent, right? Like, I am overwhelmed. I feel dysregulated when my baby cries. I am struggling to be responsive or to be present. So it's really to kind of take that relationship and elevate it in a very safe, secure, supportive way. We are very much in the business of not activating shame or guilt, but really helping caregivers feel safe to explore this with their provider. So this is just an example of this serve and return, right? This baby is serving a message, and what's the message? What would you say this baby is saying if they are speaking? Scary, yeah. And you can point out, right, what is the behavior that helps you understand that? What do you see on the body? Because what's not sound? The eyes, the clenched fist, the tight forehead. So these are serves. Now, some caregivers aren't going to detect this, or if they do detect it, may not be able to respond to it in a way that meets the child's needs. But this is happening every day, multiple times. And this is like, if you dive into the attunement literature, the synchrony literature, this is what they're talking about, these little micro moments that are happening hundreds of times throughout the day. Now, the caregiver did something that's culturally determined. Doesn't matter. We aren't focused in on the culture of parenting, but more the dyadic communication between the caregiver and child. So we don't know what the caregiver did, and it really doesn't matter. What we know is that the baby feels what? Relaxed, yeah, comfortable. And that's the dyadic piece that we're working with, is how do we support that communication between the two so that they can best meet, so the caregiver can best meet the child's needs. So this is Sarah. This is like a minute and a half. She is 4.5 months, and she is going into the arms of her aunt that she doesn't know. So it's a stranger. As far as Sarah is concerned, this is a stranger, which is scary to an infant, and more scary to some infants with temperament sensitivities, and less scary to infants with more flexible temperaments. But regardless, it's scary for Sarah. So we're going to see kind of that process of infant mental health definition play out. So she's going to experience a lot of emotion. She's going to connect with somebody she feels safe with, and then she learns to explore her environment from that connection with her.
Hi, this is just... Oh, you are so cute when you cry. Oh, real tears yet. Should we have Daddy take over for a minute? So
It's happening.
would you like to take Sarah to get some in here?
I don't know if Eleanor wants to give her up.
No, Eleanor will get her later. See, and then this way.
Look at that! What a good boy!
What
What a good boy!
That was nice. Oh,
Sarah.
That was
You can pet me too, right? You can pet me?
son, you have to look at that lady.
Oh, that little clown that we.
You got your pappy now.
As long as it's a
Damn.
safe distance,
Right.
it's okay.
So it's recognizing,
There you go.
Look
at you.
and now she's exploring Eleanor from a
This
distance.
is an hour
because
later.
she's exploring
Oh.
Ooh, she likes it.
stuff. But as long as she's in her dad's arms, she feels safe.
You want me to hold her?
If you want to.
Go for it. We girls have to stick together.
Sarah's decided you're all right.
You wait for the camera.
Oh God, she doesn't even let us sneak in kisses like that.
Oh.
I'll see that.
Yeah. Is that more fun, Miss Sarah? Is that okay, Miss Sarah?
You
Uh-oh.
can see it in her body,
Oh,
right?
make little crying noises, Sarah.
Takes a look at the caregivers like, is this okay?
No, you're never out of range of the camera.
Ain't moving the camera.
You might wish to be.
Hi. You're not supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to know each other now. Here.
So that really is right there, the process of infant mental health. She's experiencing distress, which we are really well designed to experience stress, but we need to recover. And then we experience, and we learn about what's safe and what's not safe in our environments. So we saw all those aspects of infant mental health. So really, the new phrase is relational health. We are looking for relational health, which is that the child has a secure base, somebody who's going to keep them safe, and that is going to buffer them from all these external sources of stress and help them kind of master their environment through exploration. Because think about it, if a kiddo that you could imagine a preschool room, the first day for a child who comes in and who has no idea what this preschool room and all these strangers are about, that they might be kind of like uncomfortable, right? They're not going to necessarily, some kids will run in and start playing with the toys. Again, temperament plays into this. But they need to kind of feel comfortable and safe in order to explore. And so they get that safety from their caregiver or caregivers. So what we saw are the eliciting behaviors, attachment eliciting behaviors. So crying, cling, posture, attention, seeking, touching the caregiver. And then we saw the caregiving behaviors. So that's the theory. I love this quote because underlying attachment theory and all the work we do, especially with caregivers, is to help people feel safe, to explore and understand themselves and their baby. So being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. And so at the core of both our intervention, our way of being with other people is always in our mind is safety. So attachment are these self-protective strategies. They inform our implicit memory. So these are memories in our body, sensory memories, procedural memories in our body between, ages birth and 5. We don't necessarily have like other kind of adult functioning memory systems like episodic or semantic memory that comes on board later. So in infancy, it's really memories of the procedure. When I cry, this is what happens. I learn to adapt to that. And so my procedure is to inhibit for a child who's avoidant or to amplify for a child who's anxious, preoccupied. And that becomes, the more danger there is for the child, the more that strategy is relied on for physical safety. So there's emotional safety and then physical safety. So it is when that child gets to school age and they feel their attachment system activated and they feel distressed, they're going to go into the procedure that they learned in infancy. That's going to be their go-to strategy, especially if they were in danger. That strategy is going to be very deeply, that's why I have a picture of River, very deeply ingrained in their way of being. So then they get in trouble when they go to school because they're acting a certain way. It's usually the kiddos with the anxious, preoccupied strategy, the amplification of negative affect strategy that call attention to clinicians. So in preschool and school age, I mean, we expel kids in preschool at a higher rate than kids in high school because we don't get this. We don't get that they don't feel safe. So it's our go-to, it's procedural, it's subconscious, and we really need to enhance safety of the caregiver and the child. So the client is the relationship. That's what we're focused on. And for those of you who are like thinking about this as a kind of a research paradigm, one, we know that responsive caregiving is a buffer for the child. So if I have developed a sense of security with my caregiver, I'm going to be more buffered from the stress of preschool or the stress of transition to kindergarten. I have this buffer because I have this person who has my back. And that's really where most of the predictions of attachment came from, is this buffering effect. Unresponsive caregiving, unfortunately, can amplify those stresses and really kind of leave the child in a situation that's unsolvable because people don't understand why the child's behaving this way, and it becomes very problematic. And then if the caregiver is the source of stress, that's complex trauma. So in child maltreatment, where the caregiver is the one causing the adverse experiences, physical maltreatment, neglect, that is going to even amplify those other external stressors even more. Okay, so now to the empirical model. In the old school days, back when I was a grad student, we really actually had 3 strands of interventions, and these are all predictors of child behavior because it's child behavior. That's what we want to resolve. All the interventions in like the 90s and 80s were about like, let's make children behave better. We want to stop their bad behavior, their delinquency, or their acting out at school, or their, whatever is going on. It's the children who are kind of doing that inhibiting, they're not really drawing a lot of clinical attention. They typically are not doing anything wrong, right? They're really good students. They are not drawing any negative attention. That strategy works really well. So really, it's been focused on targeting child behavior. So we focused a lot of interventions on parenting behavior and behavior modification. So the client is the child and the problem is the behavior. And the solution is to train parents to do certain activities or behave in a certain way that creates a behavior modification pathway. So the stimulus is, we kind of analyze the behavior and like, well, let's be really consistent. And that works, right? To a degree, that works. But it's not necessarily getting to the crux of the matter and translatable. So another form of interventions are, we know life stress, mental health, parenting stress, interpersonal violence, and poverty all predict parenting behavior, which predicts child behavior. So case management, tangible services, and I would say absolutely, we still need those. I think for PFR, where we come in is in the relationship. So we don't target the parent's behavior, rather we target the relationship, how the parent feels about the child and how the child feels about the parent and the quality of their relationship. So we're really in this middle with a combination of where we're looking at the dyad, we use video-based feedback, And then we're also offering some kind of universal understandings of child development. So I don't know, I'll just leave it there because I'm afraid to touch anything. So we have this kind of middle point, and we do have all of our interventions showing that we're able to predict behavior. Now, this is where the model of change comes from. If our target is the dyad and really helping the parent see the child and their cues and what their needs are, and to see their own needs, right? What strategy do we use? So it really is important for you to understand the theory that drives your model, and then the expectation of what you want to support or change. And so we use video feedback. We have consultation strategies that are strengths-based, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And then we also use handouts and exercises. That's kind of that psychosocial information piece. And then a big piece is we reframe the child's behavior. So this is the intervention. It's 1 hour sessions over 10 weeks. It never happens over 10 weeks. It's more like 14. We focus on the dyad, and we're increasing parents' capacity to reflect on their internal state and needs. So how I feel about my child, how I understand my child. So many parents are like, I had no idea their behavior meant this, like it's just this huge, beautiful light bulb moment that is like the best thing in the whole wide world. Reflect on their child's internal state because, right, you have two minds, and some parents have a difficulty separating their mind and experience. Like, I'm so angry, my child is, doing this on purpose, versus the child's mind, which is actually, I'm just really excited to be at the zoo or whatever it is. So being able to kind of separate that and then observe themselves and their child in interaction, and then learn more how to connect emotionally to their child. Okay, so we are disseminated in a lot of different ways. How am I doing on time? Okay, we're disseminated in a multitude of ways. Home visiting, childcare, group intervention, in primary care. So we have promoting first, and we haven't tested this, so there's no research on the primary care one, but we had a pediatrician come to us and say, we need this, all pediatricians need to understand this, because the pediatrician is the gateway provider, right? Pretty much everybody sees their pediatrician or their family doctor. And that family doctor is really ending up dealing with a lot of behavior problems. Or my child got expelled from preschool, or every time I leave the house, he throws a huge fit. Like the pediatrician, and they're not really well equipped to deal with the new issue that's really showing up in their office. So this pediatrician helped us develop this, or really drove it, this infusion of PFR in the pediatric visit. They don't use video feedback, but they are using all the consultation strategies. We also train across the workforce. So we train child welfare providers, we train early intervention providers. So if a child between birth and 3 is getting speech or language or OT, there's a chance they've been trained in PFR. We train community mental health providers, and we train all Seattle Children residents in their rotation in child development. They get like a 4-hour class. They get the manual and they get the handouts, so they can use some of these tools in their practice. We are evidence-based. We are federally funded. We, you to get on these lists, you are vetted. Like, they rip every paper apart. They ask you to send them data. It is very, very rigorous. So to be on these federal lists, you go through a rigorous review. We're on the home visiting federal list and the child welfare federal list. The other two bottom lists are just, they're vetted lists, but they're not as intensive. Okay, so now the intervention. We train providers to kind of do, we call them consultation strategies. So the first is, at the start of every appointment, you're really checking in with the mental state of your client. Where are they at? Are they in a good place? How are they feeling in this moment? Are they ready to dive into this work? So we're holding in mind their mind, which is the parallel process. So that they can hold in mind their child's mind. And so we're doing this sort of, we're modeling that relational health in the way we are with them. So we have fidelity tools and we videotape our providers. And for example, if something is said in a way that's judgmental or you tell a parent they should do this or this, that isn't the way we believe people learn. We would rather people say, well, what works for you? What kind of things have you tried? And then have it be a dialogue. So these consultation strategies are really the operationalization of our strengths-based model. So we increase reflection, right? Oh, I'm feeling this way and my child's feeling this way through the video. We videotape for 10 to 15 minutes. We have the provider reflect on that videotape at the office, then they bring it back and they play the videotape and they stop it at key moments because they've kind of practiced it and they become fluid. It literally is like a second language. So they practice it. They practice it and they're like, oh, it's really awesome. I'm going to stop it here and give positive, instructive feedback. So positive feedback is, oh, it's really nice how you were playing with a puppet and you saw Joey was getting overwhelmed and you just sort of paused. That's positive feedback. It has to be specific and not just like, oh, you're a great mom. You really have to describe what it is that they did, because then they can see how they is supporting their child. And then the instructive piece, so you can give positive feedback or positive plus instructive, is, yeah, when you paused, it seemed like you sensed that he was moving away. What was it for you that let you know he was uncomfortable? And the parents watching this oh yeah, I just felt it. Well, by doing that, you're really attending to his need to feel safe and not get overstimulated. And so when you did that, you really helped him stay regulated. And that's wonderful. So instructive is why it's so important that you paused when you were playing with the puppet. And so again, we're going to these micro moments and really amplifying the strengths that parents have. And in our qualitative stuff, they're like, I had no idea I was doing those things, so it's great because we're elevating to the consciousness the things that are meeting the child's needs. Then we get to the temper tantrum or the difficult moment and we pause. And this is where we don't say, oh, you should have tried this. Oh, why don't you do this? No. We want them to discover for themselves what was going on, how they felt, how their baby felt. So that's literally, it's a mantra. How did you feel? Or sometimes, how did your baby feel? What did you need? What did your baby need? It's parallel. And so we pause it and we say, so what do you think was happening for Joey right there? And they will say, I think I got so excited about the Lego toys that I took over and he was frustrated with me. Yeah, what do you think he needed? And then they fill in the blank. We don't have to do the work. We don't have to be like expert. Giving them the opportunity to reflect is the power. That's where the power is, because back to the literature, mentalization and reflective capacity predicts responsive caregiving. So that's just a nod to the literature. And then we have handouts and ways to build knowledge. So we're really working in this sort of triangle of healthy relationships. Safety and co-regulation are like anchors. Attuned relationships is holding all of this together, and then we're building up reflection, and we're providing a venue to flex that muscle of reflection. So they're getting practice reflecting. Okay, so here is one of our handouts. The other thing I talked about was reframing child behavior. Here's our handout. My child won't go to sleep at night, or there's just all of these issues around, preschool or whatever it is. We have them define the behavior, and then we ask them to take a wondering stance. And we have a little worksheet. And what we do is we don't focus on the behavior. So whereas the earlier parenting intervention models really focused on the behavior and trying to treat the behavior, we recognize from attachment theory and all the 40, 50 years of research that it's really about the baby has distress. It's a communication. Behavior is a communication. It's a feeling of distress. So let's not focus on the behavior. What do you think the feeling of distress is? Adopt a wondering stance, and then reflect on that. So we anchor everything on social emotional needs. I need to feel safe. So, when he's at preschool, I wonder what's going, so you're entertaining these wondering stances. And then you're looking at, so it's very concrete, it's very tangible for parents. You're looking at social emotional needs. You bring this out all the time. Oh, I think he needs to have a sense of control. Well, I wonder what we could do. What would give him that? And so the parent is designing their own intervention for what fits for them culturally, what fits for them, like just logistically. We're not defining what to do. We're just asking them to explore different strategies to meet the child's needs. Okay, so here is a parent. She's a reunified birth parent. This is just a family and child welfare. She has given us permission to share this tape. And you're going to hear her reflecting on what has changed. You're going to hear her talk about her child's behavior. And what she did, she designed her own intervention. So let's listen.
And we talked a little bit about kind of what you're working on with him now, and how he's been doing pretty well with some of those things he was struggling with.
Yeah, he's been doing amazing.
What do you think has been kind of helped him with that? I know you've kind of worked on being consistent with responding to some of those things.
I think something that I didn't notice before, or I think I did notice it, I just wasn't doing anything about it, was giving him the attention that he needed.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, some of his acting out was him trying to get my attention or him showing me that he was frustrated. So it's been really nice actually, because the time that we have together now, there's nothing else involved. There's no phone, there's no outside sources. There's
distraction.
Yeah, there's nothing else. It's just me and him. And I've really seen a change in his behaviors. And because I before, remember how I told you he would sit at my feet and he would cry and he'd want me to pick him up. And then I would pick him up and he would hit and scratch and pull hair. And I was so frustrated because it's like, well, do you want me to pick you up or not?
Right.
And we don't have that problem at all anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with he was frustrated with me because he wasn't getting all of the attention that he needed.
Yeah.
Right? Just amazing. And so allowing people to have a venue to explore safely without judgment from the professional, to explore what the issues are, explore the child's needs, is really hugely powerful. So if you heard her talk about the need to feel notice and receive attention, and when she started to feel that need, his behavior changed. Other things that to be acknowledged and understood, that he was frustrated with her, maybe even manage upset feelings, and to obviously always to feel worthy and loved. That's always an important social emotional need, and the safe and secure. So you can just hear in her language how she figured out what he needed, and then she implemented her own intervention rather than us saying, you should do this, because, right, who wants to be told what to do? And plus, it doesn't always work, right? You're just like, you have to kind of figure it out for yourself in a way, but be given guidance and an opportunity to explore that. So I love this quote. I get it now. I get him. This is a reunified birth parent. I want to think about him a different way. It helped me to step back at PFR, help me to step back, take a breath, evaluate the situation, and understand the situation. Why is he acting that way? It's like literally she's just doing a PFR session right here. I wonder what's going on for him, because that's what a provider would say. Now she's saying it to herself. Is he scared? So she's exploring his distress, his needs, his emotions. Does he need me? She's assessing whether or not she can do something to support him if he's scared or stressed. It makes it a little more comforting in the situation. And for him, he's more happy and secure knowing that his mom gets what I'm saying or why I'm acting this way. I get him now. So we have to allow parents to explore their relationship for themselves in their context and just get to know and understand their child and their child's behaviors. I just love that quote. I think it's just amazing. Okay, so research results. We have 8 funded RCTs. The 2 ones in green are new and in the field. The 3 on the far column with the purple colors, purple and gold UW colors, are all in child welfare. So foster families, child protective services, and one we're just now finishing with reunified birth parents. And then the 2 to this side, those are in American Indian tribes, and those were RCTs conducted in rural settings where the tribal partners implemented all the aspects, everything from research to the intervention. And then moms and babies was newborns in a perinatal mental health setting. So moms who had a diagnosis of a mental health condition during pregnancy who are at risk of sort of a disruption in the relationship, received PFR when the baby was about 8 weeks of age, and it was delivered in Spanish and English. And then we're doing PFR by telehealth in green currently in Child Protective Services. And then growing together is a PFR home visiting with pediatric practice implementation of 2 sessions in the clinic. And this one we're measuring telomeres and epigenetic aging. And so I know that we might have a conversation about that down the road. Across all the studies, these are the effect sizes. So I will give you a little rundown on this. All the studies, parent-sensitive and responsive care and parent knowledge of child social emotional development improved, statistically significantly improved. So those effect sizes from 0.21, that's a small effect. You all know your Cohen's d, right? Up to 1.02, and I think the 1.02 was in one of the tribal studies. So that's sort of the standard improvement in that measure, and it's an observation measure where we videotape parent-child and have somebody code the videotape for responsive care. Parent knowledge is a self-report, effect sizes, you can see. Child problem behavior, we have a small effect size of 0.12 up to 1.18. So not all of our studies have improved child behavior as measured by the behavioral tool that we use. So that 1.12 is not significant. Child emotional development, there are different kind of observation tools for that. Child stress physiology and sleep. Prevention of foster care placement. So in CPS, we prevent 2.5 times, decent effect size. We reduce 2.5 times reduction in placement to foster care if we can get in there and provide sort of more promotive. And then improve foster care stability for kiddos who are already in the foster care system if you give this to their foster parent or their caregiver. Moderation effects, so what works for whom? It's really something you should all ask as researchers, like does my intervention, the first paper is intent to treat, full sample, did it work or not? But then you really should, I think, dive in and see if it has more or less effectiveness in different groups. And so those are papers down the road. So we show stronger effects for reunified birth parents in the first foster care study, which actually facilitated the grant that we're just finishing. If parents report they were physically abused for children, they get stronger effects on their sensitivity. These are all the top 3 are sensitivities. For the perinatal mental health, if parents had high depression, anxiety, PTSD symptoms at the start of the intervention, their sensitivity improved more. And we also had a trending effect on anxiety and depression, which we didn't, we're not designed to do that, but it was kind of nice to see. For kids in the child welfare system, if they had multiple placements or multiple removals from their caregiver, they were less likely to develop externalizing behavior if their caregiver, foster parent, had PFR. We have 3 bio studies, one with cortisol, diurnal, and stimulated cortisol in foster care. So kiddos in foster care tend to have blunted cortisol responses to stressors. The kiddos who had PFR had a more typical, like a cortisol response versus the blunted compared to the control group. And these are smaller samples nested within studies. So we also had improved respiratory sinus arrhythmia during difficult tasks. That was done in the home, an RSA. And this is not my study, but in children who are at risk for autism spectrum disorder, the children who received PFR had more typical social attention post-PFR than the control group. And I have like a document that has like all the publications and sort of a summary. If anybody's interested, I can send that out. Okay, I just threw this in here because I thought, well, maybe if I have time. But we did a kind of a cool study, I think. It was in one of our R01s. I wanted to see, like, are we really changing practice? Of course, I believe we are. Hypothesis is we are. So in one of our studies, we decided to measure the behavior of the providers who were master's level MSW trained or master's counseling trained providers. And actually most of our providers now are BA level. So we hired actors, we had scripts, we had the whole shebang. And then we looked at our consultation strategies, positive feedback, instructive feedback, and reflective questions. So at pre-training in the act, we have actors doing this. They did not verbalize, the providers did not naturally verbalize anything related to the dyad that was positive, instructive, or reflective. Now, post-training, all the other kind of verbalizations dropped because now they had a strategy to focus on the relationship and to do it in a really positive, reflective way. So you see an increase in positive, instructive, and reflective comments. And then post-training a year later, they increased in their reflective comments because it's kind of hard. It's like learning a new language. And then the positives just sort of stayed middling like that. So anyways, I think it's interesting. And I think that's it. I just have one little quote from a parent. PFR helped me understand my child's emotions and needs, and the videos help me step outside of the moment and give me a chance to see room for improvement, which is really a nice summary. If you Google Red Talks, Promoting First Relationships, if you're interested in tribal communities, the community we were in put together their own Red Talk. It's a play on TED Talk, and they videotaped this, they wrote the script, they did everything, and it's about 5 minutes, and it's how PFR impacted them in the randomized clinical trial. So it's really beautiful. I love it. So that's 5 minutes, and then there's my contact info.